Good to be back here. Yay! It's good to be back. I always know that you're in good hands with Robert Dilts. Isn't he a brilliant guy? Those of you that hadn't met him before, he's amazing person. He and I, my understanding is that he got to do a demonstration last night, but you didn't get to actually do the meta mirror. Is that yes? And it's a good process to do, I think, because it teaches you things on multiple levels. And I think in some ways you can relate it to the forgiveness process that you learned earlier, giving forgiveness, where you kind of have that mirror kind of thing. But I think this brings it in at a different level. So I think a great place to start this morning would be to go ahead and do the meta mirror process. And so I want to remap the territory for the next 3 days. So and give you a couple of options. When we put up our ambitious agenda, Mike called us on it. Said he was making a book we wouldn't get through it, and he's right, as usual. But so there are a couple of pieces on there that I think are more important and some less important. A couple I think are really quite useful. How many of you read Beliefs, Pathways to Health and Well-Being? If you have, you know there's a whole chapter on criteria. And criteria is something that often you deal with all kinds of life issues, like health issues, personal issues. Sometimes I get people who they want a new career, or they want to start their own business, or they want to begin a relationship. And I'll often ask them, well, so what do you want what's your criteria for that? And they hadn't really thought about it. And sometimes if you really think that through and leverage it, it makes a big difference. How many of you have changed a non-healthy habit in your life by finding another criteria that was more important to you? Like maybe you quit smoking because you wanted to live longer, or something like that. So remember years ago there's a woman in a training who was a new grandmother, and she was trying to quit smoking, but she did all these things and wasn't. And what got her to quit was wanting to spend time with her grandchildren when they got teenagers. And she was afraid that her odds would not be as good if she continued some of her unhealthy habits. So the criteria of relationship outweighed the criteria of whatever benefits she got from smoking. So sometimes criteria is a really key thing to do. Some of the biggest changes I've seen in working with NLP have come through criteria changes as well. Sometimes we're in conflict because our criteria isn't organized properly. We're weighing this one against that one. Do I want this or that? And you get in these dilemmas. And so, I know trilemmas, but you also get into dilemma. And if you reorganize your criteria and get clear on what's important to you, that can make a big difference. Another thing that I found incredibly useful with working with health issues is helping people really apply a different order of beliefs to what they're experiencing. And some of the best beliefs I've seen for health and well-being are right on these yellow banners here, the NLP presuppositions. Can you imagine what the world would be like if everybody had a firm understanding that behind every behavior is a positive intention? Do you think that'd change the world in some dramatic way? And the more you do NLP, the more convincing it is that it's true. In NLP we don't do things like exorcisms because there are no bad parts of yourself. And I've been to things where they said that's a bad part, you have to stomp it out. There's for example, in some of the coach literatures, they talk about gremlins that we have. And gremlins are the things we want to stomp out and get rid of. And you don't want to ever stomp out and get rid of a part. What you want to do is find its positive intent and reintegrate it. So this idea of things like gremlins is probably going to create more problems than it solves. So you can take, by using anchoring and the idea of disassociation and getting a double description on things, along with these NLP presuppositions, you can often make incredible changes. So we're going to be applying NLP presuppositions to to a context or to even physical issues. Remember the first time we did this in a group, we had a woman who had chronic fatigue. And she actually was in a lot of pain and was doing all this stuff to deal with that was complicated. And she was doing color therapy, and she had to sit by a window, said she had natural light. She was taking all this medicine. And we did this with her, and she suddenly realized, when we got to the idea of chunking, that things have a beginning and a middle and an ending. And she was thinking chronic fatigue. If you have a chronic fatigue, it just goes on and on and on. I think you were there, Mike, at that point. But what I remember is when she got that, it's like you could see her transform with that new understanding. And she changed dramatically after that, because her whole attitude towards it was different, and it gave her a whole new sense of possibilities. Now, when you apply these presuppositions to something that's going on, it's not always a big dramatic thing, but it's one of these things that really gives you a deeper understanding. And I find as I work with people who don't know NLP and they begin to build these possibilities in, their life gets really enriched. I have a good friend who went through a relationship, it ended, and several years later she was really ready for a new relationship. And she made a comment to me, she said, the person I'm looking for doesn't have to be NLP trained, but they'd have to be able to support the NLP presuppositions. Because it's like once you really get these and they're part of your life, it's like that would be accepting something less if people didn't get this for her. And I thought I think it made a lot of sense. So what we want to do is, the goal would be to get the NLP presuppositions really in the muscle. Tomorrow, and we'll see where we are, but I think that'll take us through the day. And then tomorrow, it's time to do our modeling. And I think there are a couple of possibilities. Often what we've done is modeled self-healing, so you can figure out what you do when you heal and make the unconscious conscious so that you can build on it and make it better. And if we do it in a really thorough way, what we can do is we can do it in a group of 3, and we'll find what Oscar, Debbie, Tim do, each one of us do, then we can identify what's the same with all of us, and then build a model that we can install. And if we do that and find out what different groups do, then we can build a supermodel, so to speak, of what works, and often enrich each other's healing maps. The other thing we can model as an alternative would be familiarity. And night before last, Chris and I had dinner with Robert and Deborah, his wife, and I happened to mention this, something I thought would be interesting to model, which is the idea of familiarity. And I mentioned to him, I was thinking about a time when he was working with this nurse who was going to kill herself and take out her children. He said he brought it up with the group and mentioned it. And he had her looking up, and then pretty soon she's looking down here again. He said, why are you down here? And that just felt more familiar. I think a lot of times people don't change because things aren't as familiar. So if we can model out what is familiarity, what's the structure of familiarity, and then you can program that in with any change you're making, you might consider that. Think of all the things that if they were just familiar to you, wouldn't that be cool? So we'll have an option. Though some of you might want to model your own healing, some might want to model familiarity. But modeling is what NLP is really all about, and I think when you get an advanced group like this, we can start doing what I think of as real modeling at this point, because you've got a lot of distinctions that you wouldn't have at an earlier stage. On Monday, I will show a video of family constellation work of Bert Hellinger doing some family constellation work, which is a really very interesting thing. And what I found is what he's really doing is externally mapping what you'd have in your own submodalities. So we can find out your inner social panorama and begin to change that in a sense I'll show you how you can do it. He does it in a way where you need an audience. You don't always have that luxury when you're in your office with one other person. So there are other ways to do it, and I think you'll find it really interesting. The way you perceive your family system in your brain, in your mind, the way you have that coded, has tremendous impact on you that's going to be unconscious. And often what we think of as fate is really part of the family mind that you're operating from. So we can take this idea of fate and change it sometimes, create a new fate. So those will be some of the places we'll be going in these 3 days. So, and then I'd like to have a couple of open frames too, times where there may be things that you'd want to touch on. So that you'd want to explore that we maybe haven't. So that sounds like a good map for the weekend, for the next couple of days. And today at lunch, you'll have the opportunity to see this attractive young lady who we modeled some really fine, outstanding students who are brilliant in many ways, and I think we call them straight A's. I think they all, one of them had straight A's, but the other one admitted she got a B once. And but anyway, these 3 students have incredibly useful strategies for how to be beyond the paper like a procedure. If you follow a fixed procedure, you're going to get variable outcomes. And so the goal more and more is for you to be able to go with the flow of the person you're working with and deviate from what's on here rather than, the question should never be any more with the group, with us in here, like, what do you do for this kind of issue? I think it should be more like, we're always doing what the person needs as best we can. So the steps on this. So first of all, let me run it through. I think an easy way to do it would be to run it through in your mind, and then you'll have a map of it. First of all, can you think of somebody you have difficulty communicating with? Some of you go, no, I'm pretty good. Most of us have some challenging people in our lives, right? Yeah. People who don't listen, or people who don't pay attention, who are easily bruised if you don't say exactly the right thing, or they can be offended if you're not always saying things in the right, proper tone of voice. And y'all think of somebody like that? It could be a customer, it could be a client, it could be a family member. Most every family's got at least one of these somewhere, tucked away. Okay, now visualize that person from your own perspective. Just be there with them. And put yourself with that person and name the trait that makes that communication difficult. They're pig-headed, or they don't listen, or they're grumpy. They're incongruent, they're in denial. Y'all label what they're doing? Yes. One of the things we can do the best is, I think, is label people's behaviors. So think of how you might label it. Now go to an observer position and look at them and the relationship. So it's like you could pull yourself back out and witness you and them, however that is. So far it's a little like the giving forgiveness piece, if you remember that, right? You step back and you watch it and get a sense of what's going on and see how you're behaving in relationship to them. What are you doing? So, for example, if they're being really nasty and aggressive and you find yourself being nasty and aggressive back, one possibility. Or maybe you get intimidated and you find yourself withdrawing. But judge your behavior in a sense. What are you doing? What are you doing that you don't want to be doing? So maybe you're even being just judgmental, or maybe you're getting an emotion like you're feeling scared or uptight or worried. Got it? Now notice, how is your behavior actually reinforcing that behavior? How are you bringing it on, so to speak? How many of you have noticed, how many of you remember back, at least if you were in our training, we did something called couple re-anchoring way back in the early days of practitioner. And what you find is you create a calibrated loop with another person. So, for example, somebody might start getting loud and you respond to that in some way, getting uptight. And the more you do what you do, the more they bring it on. Remember that? And if you start changing it, you change your state to something like being open or being curious or being in some positive state, they can't quite do it the same way anymore. So you may even remember how fun it can be to push some of these buttons as long as it works. If there's no button to push there, it stops. Susie Smith was telling me years ago that when we were doing couple anchoring, she said, I wish I'd known this when I was a kid, because she had a cousin that was a few years older than she was, that lived like next door. And what he used to like to do all the time from when she was like 3 till 8 or 9 was whenever he saw her, he'd grab her and he'd tickle her and he wouldn't stop until she started crying. And she'd be screaming, stop, stop. You know, have you ever had somebody do that when you were a kid? Yeah. And it got annoying, or it was, sort of invasive and all that. And, at some point she said she just stopped responding. She made a decision to not be ticklish. And he started doing it and she didn't respond at all, and she said he never did it again. Because the calibrated loop was gone. She wasn't doing anything to get him to bring it on anymore. So find out as you watch and listen to you in response to this person, what are you doing, if you're honest, to help keep it going? One way you can do this is, if you look at you and the other person and you're doing what you're doing, if you kind of plucked yourself out of the situation and just saw the other person. So see the other person and hear them without you in the picture now. Could they keep doing what they're doing if you weren't there to react to? Usually they can't, because you're not there, right? They might do it with other people, but could they do it with you? Of course not. So get a sense of what are you doing to bring it on. And then take a minute and think about what are some other ways you could respond to that person, like Susie did. So if she's getting the tickle treatment and she doesn't respond anymore, she just lays there and stares at him with the kind of a bored look on her face. That changed that behavior. What could you do that would be really different? What if you started laughing? Or what if you changed the subject? Or what if you started crying? Or what if you talked in a soft voice? Or what if you looked at them with really compassion, a lot of compassion in your eyes, and asked them what they really wanted? Think of all the different things you could do. Maybe you've even tried to change your behavior in some ways. You might think, what's kept you doing this? You've had some investment in being this way, haven't you? If you think about it, some investment in your ongoing responses. So now step aside to kind of this other position and think about, how do you treat yourself? How do you treat yourself when this is going on?
So right now you're in which position?
Well, you've been witnessing it. But now kind of step aside from yourself and look at you and get a sense of what have you been doing with yourself. Does that make sense? So let's say Fred comes in and Fred is nasty to me and I'm nasty back. And then later I think, gosh, I shouldn't be that way. That's not like me. I don't know why I'm that way. Then I beat up on myself. Or maybe I even reinforce it by saying, with a jerk like Fred, you've really got to be a jerk back, or something like that. So what am I doing with myself? In other words, now we're taking a new relationship and we're saying, how are you treating yourself in this situation? What are you, often it'll be something like you'll berate yourself, or you beat up on yourself, or you might even think you've got no other options. But get a sense of how you treat yourself here in this context. Kind of a meta position here. How many of you have thought about the way you react to yourself? Now try this out. Step back to an observer position and see yourself again with that other person, but treating them the way you treat yourself. What happens?
seeing you treating yourself.
Sorry?
I lost my question. When I was confused about how do I see myself treating the other one, treating when I don't like it or when I want to be.
The way you are, whether you like it or not.
What position is that?
Yeah.
The way I want to change.
Right. So let's say, for example, Fred comes in, he's nasty to me, and I think, you know, you've got to meet fire with fire. If he's going to be nasty to me, I'm going to be strong back. I'm going to do the same thing back. So then I stop and I watch now how I'd be with Fred doing that same thing. So Fred comes in, he's nasty, and I go, Fred, you've got to be doing that because I'm pretty strong and you've got to be strong in dealing with me. Does that make sense? Notice if I do that, what's going to happen to the relationship now? So that's what I want to find out. So now I watch and listen to myself treating Fred the way I'd treat me. Does that make sense to everybody? It's from a observer position, from the third position. We're just switching positions from here to here. Got it? So really, yes?
The fourth position, you design the whatever, you know, add the resource to the system. So make sure that the system comes to...
Yeah, the meta position is a way to step back and say what's going on in the bigger system. So it's a way of pulling yourself out of the system. But now what we're going to do is treat Fred the way we treat ourselves. And notice what happens. It may be good and it may not, but notice what happens when you do. Give me a nod when you've done that. Is everybody understanding what I'm suggesting? Yes?
I'm not clear on the difference between the third and the fourth position.
You know what? Forget about the positions, because this is really easy. Just think of the way you treat yourself, and then treat the other person as you treat yourself. Without worrying about all these positions, I think that's what's confusing. Does that make sense?
So like if I'm feeling scared, I should tell that person that you should feel scared because, or you should feel mad because.
No, let's say I'm feeling scared, but how am I treating myself about feeling scared? That's what we're going for. So if you say to yourself, you shouldn't be scared, you should stand up to Fred. Or you shouldn't be scared, you should just trust the universe is going to support you because you're in integrity here. Then Fred comes in and I go, Fred, you shouldn't be scared or upset because the universe is going to support you if you're in integrity here. Does that make sense? So find a way to treat that person the way you're treating yourself. And notice what happens. It may be good and it may not. I'm not going to, but it's a really interesting thing to do, to start noticing how are you in relation to that person. Does that make sense to everybody, what I'm saying? Okay, so do that. Notice, how many of you have done it and you've kind of got it? How many of you still don't get it?
I have a question.
Yes?
So what if you're not treating yourself good in that situation either? So
Well-
that's how you would like to treat yourself?
No, it's how you actually treat yourself.
Okay.
It's probably different than the way you treat Fred. So let's say that Fred comes in and he badgers me and I start going, boy, Tim, you're such a wimp to put up with that. You know, what kind of a jerk are you? You'll never amount to anything. Now, instead, I imagine Fred comes in and I go, you're such a jerk. You'll never amount to anything. You know, you're a wimp. And I just see what happens when I do that, because that's the behavior that Fred's coding in that keeps it going. It's the unconscious thing that Fred's responding to. Does that make sense?
Mirror each other.
It's the mirror, yeah, the mirroring of each other. Yes?
So the goal in mirroring, in treating the person the way that you're treating yourself is just to see
The
what
goal
happens.
is to find out what are you doing to actually participate in this troublesome interaction going on and on and on. Typically what we're really good at is if you get in an argument with somebody, let's say Michelle and I get in a row about something, I can go away and say, boy, is she inflexible. You know, she's stubborn. I told her my point 39 times and she still didn't get it because she's so stubborn. That kind of stuff. And then I realized, well, what I was doing, so then I watch me being stubborn. I go, that's stubborn. Then later maybe I'm saying, the way I'm treating myself is to be self-righteous. So then I see Michelle and I watch her I shouldn't pick on Michelle. She's not like this at all. But anyway, she comes in, and then I see myself, and I think of the self-righteousness. What if I treated her that way, and I say, you're really being self-righteous with all this stuff. But what I'm really realizing, it's my self-righteousness that's helping to create her stubbornness. Does that make sense? So that's the idea that is in here. So once you've done that, just step back in your self position with new information that you've got. Did I leave something out? So that's the whole process. Questions? So if you do that, see, you can do it in your head. You don't really need all these positions.
The last step, do you do it in your head, or do you do the last
Wait,
step? Do you
sorry, I can't hear. There's too many conversations. So this will be the context. So we're going to start, if you look at your notes, by having a context here. And we'll just call that fibromyalgia.
Okay.
Now, fibromyalgia, if somebody says, I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about those words to start with. What is fibromyalgia? If somebody says, I have that, linguistically, what does that mean?
Pain in the muscles.
It's actually, though, if you think of it in a linguistic way, it's misinformation.
Like Morgellons, like
like a
fibers
thing, though,
growing
right?
out of the muscle. That's what you think of, growing out of
So
the
how do you?
nerves.
So you start thinking about how you. This is like a thing you have, right? In a way, when you think of
Yeah.
it that way, if you think about, I have a cold. You ever thought about this way? So just try saying, I have a cold. If you did, pretend you
I
did.
have a cold.
Now, say I have an arm.
I have an arm.
You're gonna process those things in the same way. But if you said, try saying, I'm colding.
I'm colding.
Notice that's a lot more of an accurate description, because a cold is a process going on. But you're not even colding. What are you really doing? There's a process going on in your body where you're, well, I wouldn't say fighting.
I'm actually decolding right now.
You're decolding. good.
Yeah.
So-
I prevented a cold with NLP, I think,
Oh,
because
cool.
I felt it welling
Felt
up.
it coming
then
and you got
I
it.
decided not to manifest the symptoms.
Good for you. So what a cold is the process in your body where organisms have been invading your cells and your immune system's cleaning it up. That's basically what's going on with a cold. As a result, you get runny nose, red eyes, all that stuff that comes with it. And that's what's really going on. You don't have a cold. So think of it, when we language these things, it can really help. I found the power in relanguaging is really important. Chris and I have been playing around a lot with anytime we say something like that, calling each other on it and saying, what is it actually? Because the words you use are going to create this inner representation. Remember when Robert and I were here the first day and we talked about the person who said, if I have money, I'll lose it, but later she said, if I have money, I'll squander it. You take those kind of meanings and they create really different representations in your brain. So if I think fibromyalgia, how do you think about that? So if your doctor says you have that, first of all, he or she is saying you've got a thing, and you don't have a thing.
Right. I don't have a thing. I have an expression of something that's working itself out, maybe.
Ah. And actually, could you turn a little bit this way so they can see? Do that again. Tell us again.
I have an expression of something that's working itself out.
That's kind of nice, isn't it? That's probably a lot more accurate. So, okay, so we're going to start with the context here. And then what we can do is we can start thinking through this context in a variety of ways using the presuppositions. So, Serena, if you just step in front of this and be there for a minute with that. Get a sense of this whole idea of what actually comes up for you when you think of this fibromyalgia. How you think about it, what it means, how it impacts you. A sense of okay. So there's some symptoms that you're aware of, right? That come up for you. And how does she look to you? Internal, external? And step out. So when she goes into that space, it doesn't even look like you normally do. Even if you're dealing with this, you're the kind of person that tends to be out in the world in some way. Okay. So now what we can do is start taking these, and on your notes, by the way, there's some sample presuppositions. But don't just stick with the couple or three or how many ever I have up there, 6. Because you'll find sometimes one of them will make all the difference. Some will have less impact, some will have more. It's just a way of thinking things through differently. So let's just start with positive intention. Or we might even call it positive purpose. So in life, we don't do things without having a good reason for it, right? And being a bright and intelligent organism that you are, you're not going to do something for no good reason. So I'm going to ask you to step here to start with, and just step in front of this, and find a time when you really fully got this idea of positive purpose, that behind every behavior is a positive intention. It could have been one of your own behaviors or somebody else's. Or find a time when you've really got that, when it's clear to you. And give me a nod when you've got one.
I think I have one.
What is it?
It's when I first heard about the positive intention of getting a cold or the flu.
Oh. It might be to get you to slow down and take care of yourself.
That's
something
right.
like that.
That's it.
Or have you ever done something and you knew you were well intended and maybe it was even misunderstood? You were trying to do something.
Sure, right.
So think of all those times and places where behind every intention is a positive, or behind every behavior is a positive intention. And now we're going to do this in a couple of ways. Look out here and see yourself, so you can see yourself out there with a full understanding of that. So that's when you were getting the idea of positive intention. And just get a sense of how, when you understood that, how that got you to think and act and be. So we start out by doing it disassociated first. Got a sense of that? Now, get a sense of this idea of positive intention. So I guess you step into that now. And really think of this context, this fibromyalgia, from that behind every behavior is a really positive intention. Notice how you think about it now, through those filters and in that way. Behind every behavior is a positive intention. Behind every experience is a positive intention. It's like, remember when Pat, Robert's mom, had a recurrence of breast cancer, later she was saying to it that, she said, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it got her to live differently and to think in a whole different way about life and about herself. So get a sense of how this might be what's in this for you. You don't have to say it, but just get a sense of what you know here. When you think of it that way, it's a bit different, yes? So step out. How many of you could witness the difference when you... So kind of shake that up. Now, we want to test it on everyone, so just step back into here and think about this now. Notice how already something's quite different, isn't it? Good job. Okay, step back. Now we'll just... How about another one? So I can just randomly do these. How about there's no such...
Oh, okay.
You're
I
not
thought you
done.
meant another student.
No. We're just getting started.
Right.
So you know the NLP presupposition, there's no such thing as failure. There's just feedback.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. There's no such thing as failure, just feedback, right? It's like with NLP, it's the only thing that allows us to be able to do NLP, because you try something out, and if it doesn't work, you do something else. If human beings are the only species I know that say, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, right? Instead, a dog wouldn't do that. If it tried it once and it didn't work, it'd usually try something else. A cat would, for sure. You being a cat person. So take a second. I'm going to ask you to take a step forward and find a moment where you fully understood this idea of, oh, that isn't working, I'll do something different. And find a really powerful one. I know you've done that a lot with your NLP work, but also there might be other places in your life where you really got that. And get a sense of those ideas. And how do you feel in your body when you're in that state of, I just need to do it differently. There's some other way of doing this. I need to bring up more.
I'm thinking of the example of helping a coaching client with that, or would I have to?
That's good.
Okay.
But think of that, how the coach client, what you did with them. And think of another time when you really got it for yourself. Have you ever tried something out and it didn't work and you just, think of all the simple ways we do that all the time. Have you ever done something like, there's something in the house and you need to fix it, and so you grab a table knife and it doesn't work, and then you have to go get a screwdriver? So you go, that table knife didn't work, I'll try a screwdriver, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So find a good example of that. Just a time when you really know that.
Something.
And feel what that's like when you do it. It's like, next, I won't do that, I'll do this. Okay, good, excellent. Now see yourself out there with that kind of knowledge and get a sense of how you'd look in relation to this as you're healing yourself with this set of symptoms that have been going on. Got a sense of that?
Yeah.
Now take this idea right into here and get a sense of this whole complex of stuff you've been dealing with, but through the lens of, there's no such thing as failure here, just feedback.
Right.
You can't ever fail. It's just, if you fail, it's because you didn't try, you give up, right? Like with NLP, I love NLP because there's no failure in NLP. If it didn't work, you do something different.
Yeah.
And the same with everything else in life that works, yes?
True.
Get a sense of that for you. In relation to this context, your healing, your help.
Okay.
And step back. Now let that go. Okay, Serena, step in here. Put yourself in there. Think about the same thing. Breathe there. And already you're seeing more of a different state now, right? So you can do additions. So step back down. And how about the NLP presupposition, you've already got all the resources there are. It's just a matter of how do you organize them.
Yeah.
If you're working with your clients, you know that. Otherwise, you couldn't help them because you'd assumed that you had to fix them. But with NLP, we're always drawing the best out of people knowing that they've already got it. So that's something that you know about. So step in here and get a sense of that, about how, think of somebody you believe in. And even if they're down and out for a moment, you know, you've got what it takes, you can do it. That kind of thing.
Okay, sure.
Find somebody you believe in. And there have been people in your life that have believed in you too, yes?
Yes.
Get a sense of that. Those people who believe in you know you've already got what it takes. It's just a matter of you pulling it together and make it work. Yes?
Right.
Got that?
Yeah.
That one looks really good. Now see yourself out there dealing with this health issue with that knowledge fully as a part of yourself. How you'd look and move and act if you know that I've already got all the resources. It's just a matter of getting it together. There's no such thing as failure. There's some positive intention to this. And take a step forward and really put it into this time and place. And recognize you've got all the resources. You can see, you can hear, you can feel, you can smell, taste. They make up all of that. You've got energetic understandings. You've got creativity. You've got, think of all the power you've got. Got a sense of that?
Yeah.
And think of it in relation to this. Don't look so grim. Smile. There you go. There, okay. Now step out. Now find one. Which one do you like?
How about, well, I like energy flows where attention goes.
Which is true, especially when you're relating it to health. If you ever had a cut on your hand or paper cut, and the more you think about it, the worse it is, but then something distracts you and you forget about it. So you think about those kind of things. So over here, we'll just put this here. take a moment and get a sense of, find a really good example of a moment in your life where you really knew this. Energy flows where attention goes. Whatever you put your attention on expands, right?
Yes.
If you focus on the problem, it gets bigger. If you focus on the solution, it gets bigger.
Right.
If you focus on what's good about somebody, you like them. If you focus on what's negative, you don't. I mean, this one's one of the sort of obvious ones that we miss as human beings sometimes. But just get a sense of energy flows where attention goes. And now see yourself out there with the knowledge of that in your healing journey here.
Okay.
And see yourself attending to those things that are going to support your well-being. And maybe it's part of your lifestyle. It could be part of what you attend to, where you put your attention in your body, who you deal with, who you talk to, how you respond to things. Got a sense of that?
Yeah.
Now step into this context of this idea of this, really taking this idea of energy flows where attention goes. Where do you want to put your attention? This idea of attention is such an important one.
Yeah.
So,
I think what you were saying about the people I surround myself with is really important.
Yeah. So get a sense of them. And which ones are going to support your health and well-being. And what qualities do you want to have them help reflect back to you. Have a sense of that?
Yeah.
Okay, then step back. And take a big breath and let it go. Now step back into the place one more time. Lovely. And how is it now when you think about this? And really think about this symptom complex you've been dealing with as, you know, whatever's going on, it's a communication. Behind every behavior is a positive intention. So take that idea. Take the idea there's no such thing as failure, just feedback. You've got all the resources you need. And that energy flows where attention goes.
Yeah.
And what's different for you at this point?
I feel more resourceful and powerful and less desperate.
Think about moving.
When you're desperate, you're
Yeah.
internal.
So
and
show us if that's desperate, what does your body look like when you're resourceful? And just imagine walking into your future with this, into later today, into tomorrow, and next week, and next month, and just taking this with you in a full, rich way. With that. And even knowing that as you open your body like that, it creates new possibilities versus this, right?
Yeah. And I can bring them in.
Yeah. Because before you were like this.
In an elegant way.
From that
instead of-
perspective, from
yeah.
this, here's what you were doing.
Yeah.
That's going to make the symptom set worse, right? But this, even if you don't feel like it, it's going to make all the difference. Okay, then step out. Now, for the demonstration's sake, I could keep doing the same process, but you get the process, right? So let me ask you, when you get with your partner, to do more of these that we haven't done yet. So I'm not asking you to just do 4 and stop. I'm saying do most of them with your partner. And find out what happens, because sometimes you get one that's just like, this, you know, it's like suddenly you see what you need to do. Already you look really different. So,
Yeah.
and it looks really good from here. So, questions first for her.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay.
How do you feel really different?
I feel more resourceful and powerful and less desperate and more open to possibilities, and like I have more choices. And I already feel less tired.
How do you feel
which is
here?
good. Yeah, I'm not
How about you notice she held
focused
herself
at
there?
all on the area.
And look how she's standing. And look on her
And
face.
happier and more calm.
It looks really good from here.
Tim, I noticed you didn't make any direct relationship with the fibromyalgia. Is that intentional?
I mean, I talked. Well, remember I gave the little. I got on my little soapbox about the words about fibromyalgia.
Right.
So, what I'm saying, I think there's a process going on in her life that she's dealing with, you know, with its ups and downs. So I started calling it, I was wanting to reframe it from you've got fibromyalgia to you're on a healing journey, because I think that's the truth.
So that's what I'm getting at. So the state to it.
So the more I do this, the more I'm going to keep reframing it and scooching it that way. Because I started saying, I said the first time this fibromyalgia thing, and then the second time I said this set of symptoms, and the third time I started saying this healing process, your healing journey.
But pretty soon you weren't even talking about it at all.
No, because it's really,
at that point, yeah.
because we want to reframe the whole thing. I don't think she's got fibromyalgia. I think that's bogus. I think she's on a healing journey. There's been processes going on. But I know she can resolve it. And if she starts thinking of it, I'm on a healing journey, it's going to make a different road than if she thinks I'm dealing with this problem. And I think something like energy flows, where attention goes, is really going to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Thank
Do you have a
you.
comment on that?
Would you say fibromyalgia and then the healing journey?
I'd say the healing journey is a lot better even than that. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. The cool thing is Mark is much too nice to try to get revenge. Aren't you? Aren't you? Just go do a meta mirror on it. Okay. Sorry about that, Mark. Yes? Wait, I think Norm wasn't
the
heard.
final statement was, yeah, you could add your own to the bottom of the list, and they can become your personal presuppositions as they know.
So you could add some of your own personal things to this, or personal presuppositions, or things that are meaningful to you. You could add affirmations to it. Yes?
And this very exercise helps to understand deeply these presuppositions.
The presuppositions, because for how many of you did they get more real than they've been? Yeah. I mean, they've been, like most of us go, those are great ideas, and it makes them sort of living in a sense, doesn't it? So, how many of you have, when you think about the context now, is it better in some way? Okay. Yes?
I find the difference when I would tell the presupposition or when I would say I have the resources I need. It is even more personal.
So if you put it in an I statement, it makes a difference for that. Yeah. One thing that could be interesting to play with, Robert McDonald, he actually developed that releasing enmeshment process. He went through all of these and put them in first person. So you say something like, behind every one of my behaviors is a positive intention. There's no such thing as failure for me, only feedback. And sometimes it helps to personalize those that way. Or you can do it in a relationship. I know that behind every one of your behaviors is a positive intention. Those kind of things. So if you start shifting up the pronouns, it can be really nice. Okay, so other comments, questions, experiences? Yes, Stacey?
I noticed while I worked with
Can you stand up, because I think it's hard to hear with that fan on this side.
I just noticed when they stood in their presuppositions that there was information that was coming in that they weren't accessing otherwise, and you just see the aha moment.
Well, there's something powerful about stepping into the space. And so often when people are just sitting, they won't get anywhere near the same information. I know I train a lot of different institutes, and it seems like I might be the only one that goes around, and Susie harping on this. Stand up and move. Because if you're just sitting the whole time in the same space, it's a lot harder to organize your experience. If you get up and move around, you've got all your resources. And you know, I've had people say, yeah, I'm a coach, but I couldn't ask people to stand up. They'd think that was weird or unusual. You know, it doesn't matter what they think, because you're offering them an experience, and you've got to be the leader in that situation. So it's kind of like the patient goes to the doctor and says, I want you to cut me here, open from here to here, or maybe over here, but I want any scars. Yes.
The thing I found working
John,
with
could you stand up? 'Cause I think with the fan, I'm seeing people.
I was working with Mike, and the thing I found is like this big long list, you had a piece of paper. We started off with one or two basic presuppositions, and then they themselves were saying, I want to go here next. It was a kind of a natural process. We almost didn't have to consult the list, because that part of me that I just addressed said, no, I need to go over here and look at the map, not the territory, and that then I needed to go over here and look at
So one of the things you did is you let your partner choose which one to go next.
Well, no, my subconscious was choosing as I got into one, as I examined my context from one particular presupposition, it gave me information about where I should go next in itself. It wasn't Mike, he was just holding the space. But, you know...
Then it guided you, you got to guide yourself through
the... One presupposition led me to the next, to the next, to the next. It was almost like self-selection. You didn't have to choose or didn't have to look at anything.
I was going to comment that it was really fun being the guide. I was hanging out with your life on this horse.
You know those guys from England. I did the same thing. I just kind of just let whatever popped, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. Yeah, and it just guided me through. Which is amazing.
Sometimes I've written them all out and then put them on like yellow stickies, and I'll just let the person choose one and put it down. So I'd like to move on to criteria and do some work with getting clear about criteria, getting criteria together. You might remember back, usually it's talked about in practitioner trainings, but if you think back to criteria, criteria is what's important to you in a context. So if I say to you, what's important to you in a if you go to a restaurant, what's important to you in a meal, what would you say? What would you say, Elena? Healthy
choice, yeah.
Healthy choice, what else?
Service.
Service, are they serving it well? What else?
A place to wash your hands before you eat.
Okay, is there, so does it have the amenities I need to eat properly? Or if you go to some little hole in the wall in San Francisco, it may not have anywhere to do that. Okay, what else?
Flavor.
Taste, flavor. What else?
The ability to have a conversation.
Somewhere you can talk without yelling.
Yeah. Presentation.
The way it looks. Okay, so you get an idea of, and we're all going to answer kind of different things, right? So criteria are beliefs about what's important in a context. They're different than values in that a value is what's important to you across context, like freedom, kindness. You might say, well, and I want to have a certain amount of freedom no matter what context I'm in. But probably tasty doesn't come in every context. So if you go to buy, if I said, what do you want in a car, you're going to come up with different criteria than what do you want in a meal or what do you want in a relationship or something. And obviously there could be some overlaps here and there, but generally each context is going to have its own grouping of things that are important. So conflict is what's important to you in a situation. And what I find is often people are pretty unclear about that. So one of the things that can be very helpful is with criteria is there's some things we want to make sure. First of all, are they up to date? Sometimes you have criteria that you developed at some point in your life and you've never revised them. So if somebody said to you, how many of you make different food choices now than you did when you were 12? If I say, what do you want in a meal? You know, when you're 12, you might have gone a Happy Meal at McDonald's. But now you might say, I want, something healthy, fresh, and etc. So are they up to date? Sometimes I find, one I've worked a lot with is relationship. And often I'll find with relationships, somebody will still be operating with their high school version of what they want in a person. Or they're even asking the wrong question. What I find typically is I'll say, so what's your criteria for a relationship? And somebody say, like this woman I was working with recently, well, what I want in a guy is, and then names that, which is the wrong question. The wrong question is, what are your criteria for a relationship, not in a person? Does that make sense? I learned that when I had a kind of a juxtaposition. I had a guy come to me, and I was working with him, and one of the things that he talked about was how the most important thing in his life was his relationship with his wife, and it was wonderful. And he said, and then later we were doing kind of a values clarification thing, and he said, I'd really have to say the most important thing in my life is my wife, Jeannie. He said, most important thing in my life is my relationship with my wife, Jeannie. And I remember that he talked about what a great relationship it was. then a couple of days later I had somebody else come to me and they were having a horrible relationship. And the guy said basically, the most important thing in my life is Mary. And I thought, well, they're both saying the same thing, but they weren't. Try this on. Say the most important thing in my life is, and then name somebody, even if you're not in a relationship, make up some name. Fred or Mary. Most important thing in my life is my relationship with Fred or Mary. Notice what that's like. And then try, the most important thing in my life is Fred or Mary. What's different? How many of you have a different set of submodalities there? If it's your relationship, there's something between you and the other person, and you have some control there. If it's about the other person, you've lost all that. You're out of control. So it's important to ask the right question. So one, are criteria up to date? Are they serving what you want now? Are you still operating out of old imprints or old beliefs or even a different culture? Sometimes, I've met people who grew up in some other culture. They've maybe lived in the U.S. for 20 years, but they're still wanting things to be shaped the way they were. I have a client that was from Peru, and there were certain Peruvian ways that he always regretted weren't here. He'd lived here for over 20 years, so it's kind of like sometimes you've got to shift those criteria about what's important to you because they're not available here. Certain things didn't happen in the U.S. that happened in Peru. So are they up to date? Another one, are they in order? Are they prioritized? Are they in some kind of hierarchy? Like more important to less important? So that you aren't surprised or don't have... If you think about what's the structure of regret, often regret happens because you didn't have these prioritized properly. You didn't realize it. You weren't clear about your priorities. So that's when you go into the restaurant and you've got $5 in your pocket and you start drooling over the thing that costs 20 and you realize you don't have the money for it. I mean, that'd be, nowadays you all have credit cards, but if you think about that, it's that kind of thing. Or you get surprised because it's not exactly the way you wanted it. So, another thing, criteria can be in conflict. So you can say, I want that, but I want that. I want it to be comfortable, but it needs to look a certain way. But all the ones I try on that look this way aren't comfortable, but the comfortable ones don't look right. So it's like I need to look right. Sometimes you just have sometimes the criteria, it can be a problem with comparing things. So you have comparison problems. I recall one guy that we had, this guy was really interesting because he had told me early on in the practitioner training, he was actually a lawyer, and he told me that he couldn't make decisions. I thought, well, in that business you've got to do it, right? But I remember being at a restaurant and we were watching him order and he got the menu and he was there forever. We were almost finished by the time he was, and so we modeled out what he was doing, and he would apply different criteria to different things. So he might look at the salad and he'd say, well, that'd be light and healthy and I'd feel good later. And then he'd look at the hamburger and he'd go, well, that'd be nice and filling and be really tasty. But what was that other one? Oh yeah, salad, that'd be nice and light. So he's not applying the same criteria to things. He also did the same thing with the car, and he said it took him forever because he went down to he went to the Volkswagen place because he wanted something reliable and economical that would last him a long time. And he liked that, but then he went to look at a sports car. And he applied totally different criteria. Oh, it's quick and it's good looking and it's got some prestige value. But this one over here is reliable, and so by not applying the same criteria, you can never make a decision. You've got to get them all on the same map and say, which one fits my criteria from more to less, and then it becomes a lot easier. So you can have problems with what you're comparing to. So there can be a lot of issues with criteria. There can also be things of what I call degree. So let's say one of your criteria for, let's say you're going to attend a workshop or something. You say, well, what's important to me is that I have fun. Now, with a word like fun, you can have a little bit of fun or a whole lot of fun. So if you can go to a program, would you want to go to a program that's a little fun with a lot of learning, or a lot of fun with a little learning? And if people aren't clear about that, they get confused about and disappointed often, because it isn't really what they thought it was. Yeah, it was fun, but it wasn't that fun. Yeah, I learned a lot, but it wasn't that much fun. Those kind of things that you'll hear people say later. So our decisions, these are the whys in our decision. Why did you choose that? If I said, look at what you're wearing, somebody says, why did you choose that today? What would you say? Probably come up with a lot of things. Well, it seemed appropriate for the situation. It would be right for the weather. I'm comfortable in it. It's casual, but not too casual to be inappropriate in this kind of setting. So you think of what you might be applying as a why. So just as a comments about this, or what do you think of criteria? Yes?
The last one that you wrote, degree.
Degree. You can have a little bit or a lot of something, but it's the same thing. So if you could have lunch, and it'd be fairly good, tasty, but really healthy, or you could have a lunch that was really tasty but kind of healthy, which one would you take? How many of you would vote for taste? How many of you would go for the healthy? So notice it's the same lunch. I mean, the same possibilities, but depending on what's important to you, you're going to choose it differently. So we have a matter of degree.
I think shared or not shared criteria can lead to lots of different situations, particularly in relationships or business. And I was thinking in particular about critiquing. If you ask a student to critique a professor, by what criteria are you expecting them to critique? So no sharing, so your information that you're receiving is worthless.
And often it is worthless because they don't ask that question. Exactly. I just took a survey the other day for somebody online, one of our kind of vendors that we work with. And I went through it and I thought they never addressed any of my things I was concerned about. And they really didn't even address what I appreciated most about them. They had a little comment box at the end and I wrote down what those things were. But sometimes the criteria wouldn't even be what, they may not even know what the criteria is. So next time you're in the bar and you're meeting somebody, you go, say, what do you want in a partner like me? And then see if you've got that. Make sure it's shared. Because, by the way, that's probably, Mike said it, and I think that's probably the greatest reason for people to split up. They fight over what's important. And we know in research about relationships, most common cause of breakups in relationship isn't any content like money or sex or any of that stuff. It's how do they deal with conflict? If you go in, often you go in with sort of the opposites attract, and what they want in a situation is the opposite. You know, he wants a quiet evening, she wants to go dancing. Then they have fights over it, right? So the idea of criteria is pretty clear, yes? So what we'll do is take a few minutes, and what I'd like to do is have you look at the green pages, on page 7 actually. And we will, there's a really nice way of getting clear about your criteria. If you're really clear about your criteria, it'll just eliminate a lot of potential issues that can come up. So if you can articulate it, have it clearly outlined in your mind, and you can do it, it's really helpful. So, Leo. So Leo, if you sort of face the group here, so I can all see you. And Leo brought something up to me, and it seemed like it might be an appropriate thing to explore criteria about. Do you want to share just a little bit with us?
Yeah. I quit my job a few years ago. I got an opportunity in the Netherlands to get like start up a new career. And whenever I think of starting up new things, I get like really nervous and afraid of things going wrong, and it stresses me. And
you used interesting words. You said, sometimes my standards are so high that it'd be hard to meet them. Right? And then you feel like you're disappointing yourself.
Yeah,
it's challenging that.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a criteria issue to me. You know, sometimes criteria issues, another one is, are you applying I'm not sure how to summarize it, but are you applying the right ones to the right situation? So how do you know when it's good enough? So you might have standards. I had an employee one time who was pretty good at doing certain things, but she'd be writing a letter, and she'd get to one word, and she'd go, well, is that the best word, or should I use a different word? Or she'd try with that word, and she'd write, and then try with a different word. And I'd go, all right already, it's just a word, it doesn't matter, you know. So it'd be like, well, is he smart or bright? He's pretty bright, but maybe that smart would be a better way to describe it. Some of you do that? And you could get all hung up, you're a Virgo then. No, okay. That was her explanation. She said, well, I'm a Virgo. So anyway, we're going to take this idea of career. And our goal here will be to identify what your criteria are for a career, and then to get it really clear as a hierarchy for you. And in doing so, we should be able to unmask any kind of conflicts that there might be. Sometimes with this, we might even find, even if there's an imprint that gets in the way about just getting it right and stuff like that, sometimes laying this out is a really powerful part of creating what it is you want for yourself. So here you are, you've got your life ahead of you. You want your career to be meaningful, obviously. And so, what's important to you in your career, in your work?
Having fun.
Okay. So I'm just going to write it down, fun, on a piece of paper.
Freedom.
Freedom, say more. Freedom to, freedom from?
Freedom in working hours. The place where...
Say more about it. So, how would you know you had freedom? What would your evidence be? So one thing we can start finding is, what's the evidence for some of these things? So it's clear. How would you know you had freedom? Does that mean you choose your own hours? Does that mean...
Yeah, that's freedom, and in different places, not just stuck in one office.
Is that the same as freedom? Or does that mean you get to move around?
Yeah, that means to move around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be chained to a desk?
No, I don't think so.
So in other words, if you had to go to an office and sit in the same cubicle for 8 hours a day, that's what you're talking about, right? You don't want that?
No.
Okay. So say more about freedom now. How would you know you had it? So if I talk to you a year from now and you say, yeah, you know, I found the right career, I have freedom. All the freedom I want. And the reason I'm asking on this one, there are similar words like independence, or that may mean different things. So, and we also want to be listening with the third ear, so to speak, and because when we get the evidence, we'll start identifying things like metaprograms. Is it moving towards what he wants, or away from?
You know, for me it's a freedom which I feel whenever I go. For example, being on a holiday, being totally relaxed, you know, just...
Does that mean you can do whatever you want when you want to?
Yeah.
So if you go on a holiday that you're on a tour, have you ever done that?
I think once.
Where you're on a bus and they take you from place to place?
Yeah, only once, yeah.
Probably a good reason for it. So you like to organize your own time and schedule?
Yeah, I do.
And activities?
Yeah, I do.
And make your own goals?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by freedom? Okay,
yeah.
So I don't need to necessarily write that down, but I want to make sure he can articulate it for himself.
So when there is this there's like this special feeling of getting very relaxed whenever...
Would you want him working on your assembly line?
No.
Soldering the same 8 points on the radio board?
Oh, I miss a career here, I noticed.
Yeah. Okay. So you have be able to move around, freedom, fun. What else? What else do you want in a job? in your work?
Flexibility in the way picking up things, doing things.
Say what you mean by that. How would you know you had flexibility?
You know, whenever I was thinking about training and do something, but I get a better idea, you know, I just want to work out a better idea, just not stick to a plan. It was like...
Okay, so flexibility.
Yeah.
Is that also being creative? Or
yeah, creative options, yeah.
Okay. So another way, you choose your way of doing it, you're not having to follow a procedure.
Yeah, right.
It's more like the option.
Yeah, it's just whatever gets into my mind at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're working along at something, oh, you know, a better way we can do that. So you just want to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else is important to you? So you've got freedom, you've got being able to move around, you've got fun, you've got flexibility and creativity.
Money.
Money? Say more about money. You don't need to name an amount, but what do you mean by that exactly?
Just about making appropriate living, related more or less to freedom, just like doing things I would like to do.
So
not like millions or stuff like that, but just having a good time.
So you want enough money to have choice about your activities outside of work?
Yeah.
Okay. Like if you want to buy a house, you can buy a house if you want to do that sort of thing. Okay. By the way, it's really important to use his words exactly. I'm not putting any other words on here. So, money. Some people will use very different words for that. So what else? So money, what else?
For me, it's very important to get like a good feeling whenever I'm doing things.
So what would give you a good feeling? That's a result of meeting criteria. But we want to know, what is the criteria? How would you know, what would you do that would be giving you the good feelings?
Having interaction.
Okay, say more about that. So good interactions.
Mm-hmm.
What makes a good interaction for you? So if I come in the morning and I tell you about my shovel collection, yeah, that's it, man. I got an Ames number 4 in my garage.
Well, you know, feeling a good energy between people, just
but
it's the same.
What lets you feel a good energy between people?
Just like having a connection.
Sorry?
Connection.
People you can really connect with.
Yeah.
And what allows you to connect with people? Good interaction, good connection. Because what that is may be different for a lot of people. Does it mean you can banter around and have just amusing and fun conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it mean you go deep into a subject? Does it mean your workmates that are creative together? What for you? What would it be?
Yeah, it's amusing is very important, and getting like new ideas by just like getting new ideas just by talking.
Okay, so you're kind of like building on each other's ideas
yeah,
and supporting each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I'll just put that good interaction with connections.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you've got so far is you've got fun.
Mm-hmm.
How would you know you're having, I mean, kind of you sort of said it, but...
Whenever I'm going to laugh.
Okay. So you'd be laughing, your evidence would be you'd be able to laugh and joke around and not take it all so seriously and stuff like that. Okay, so you want fun.
Yeah.
You want freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You'd like to be able to move around.
Mm-hmm.
You would like flexibility, so you could do options and creative
Mm-hmm.
things. You want money and good interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Now we could keep doing that forever.
Yeah.
But usually I found that most people aren't going to come up with more than 8 to 10 of these at the most, and usually, sometimes it's only 4 or 5 that really matter. Usually only the top 4 or 5 make all the difference anyway. Is that pretty much it?
I don't know at the moment.
And we'll have an opportunity, if if something's missing, you'll be able to find it. Okay, so out of those things that we talked about, which one do you think is most important? Would it be good interactions, freedom, fun, move around?
I think freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah.
So we'll put freedom down here as kind of a hierarchy, so number 1. So what's next?
Fun.
What, in action, okay, so I'll just let you look at these. Fun. Flexibility, good interactions, money.
Good interactions.
Okay, ability to move around, flexibility, or money?
Flexibility.
Move around or money?
Money.
Now, money is another one of those ones that's kind of a degree. You know, so, you know, if we just say, we'll pay you €2 an hour, that's not enough. That wouldn't work for what he's suggesting. So you kind of have a sense of what that means, though, right? Then we have move around. So basically, if you look on your notes, what we've covered now is we basically named the criteria, and we just kind of put them down. Now, on here it says put them in the order that the person gave them to you in, and I didn't exactly do that, but you can. The reason I didn't is because it's, if you just show the person which way, often that array works just as well. But now what's really important, and this is the thing that makes this work, so you want to use the right words here. So we can start. So if you look at that, is that arranged the way you think it should be at this moment? So we want to give him a chance to rearrange it a little bit.
I think so.
And you think freedom would be the most important thing so far?
I think so.
Okay. Now here's where the language becomes very important. If you look at the bottom of page 7, what we want to do is make a forced choice. He has to choose one or the other. He can't, it's got to be one or the other, period. Now in real life we know that it doesn't have to be one or another, but for you to really figure out what's most important to you, we're going to pretend there's only 2 choices, you can only have one of the 2. Okay? So go stand up by freedom. Actually step here by fun, but actually step back by fun.
Yeah.
So if you can have freedom on your job, but you can't have much fun, is that okay with you?
No.
Is fun more important than freedom?
Yeah.
Okay, then shift them around. So see how when you force a choice, it starts. So fun goes there. So how about good interactions? So if you could have good interactions but not have fun, is that okay with you?
No.
Okay, so fun belongs above it.
Yeah.
You could have good interactions and connections with people in just the right way, but not so much freedom in the work. Is that okay with you? So in other words, you've got all those great interactions, but you have to follow some fixed procedures and do things a certain way. When you were in the Air Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the U.S. Army say there's the right way, the wrong way, the Army way. There's probably,
yeah.
probably the same thing in the Netherlands.
Same
right?
in Holland, yeah.
See, you had to follow procedures there.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay. So if you could have good interactions and connections, but not so much freedom, is that okay with you? Check it out really carefully for yourself.
It's a difficult one.
Well, which one?
This one. The choice.
Is it in the right
between-
order? Is that what you're saying? So in other words, if you can have really great interactions and connections, but not so much freedom in how you work or your schedule or where you work.
No, I think this order is right. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fun, freedom, good interactions.
Yeah.
So if you can have flexibility and a lot of creative options, you can, if you come up with an idea, you can go with it your way and do it your way. But you can't have good interactions and connections. Is that okay with you? That doesn't mean you'll have bad interactions and no connections, but it means that that just wouldn't be something you talk about much. But you say, man, I've got all kinds of flexibility. If I get an idea, I can just go with it. I can change things up, but you know, people you work with are just kind of uptight, grumpy. Is that okay with you? And actually try, the tendency would be to look at the floor, but kind of just get in your more upright physiology.
I think flexibility is more important
than the interaction.
Yeah.
Okay. So, step back. So you can have money, good money, like you're talking about, but not have such great interactions and connections. Is that okay with you?
No.
Well, if you can have good money and no flexibility, is that okay with you?
No.
So if you can have good money but no fun or freedom?
No.
I didn't really need to ask that, but I thought it'd be fun to ask. Okay. Okay, so take a step back. And moving around. So you're not stuck in a building somewhere, but you're able to move about town or around. You're outdoors and in different places. So you can move around like you want, but it's not such great money. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So moving around is more important than having the kind of money you're wanting. Okay, so now we've got it. So now what we want to do, if you look at your notes, is basically look for, is anything missing from the list? So as we went back, is there anything that you would want in your career that's not here? So what you've got now, and just, here's one way to do it. Put yourself there. You know, we don't know what the career is exactly, but mention you're there, you're doing it and it's fun. You're able to pretty much recognize the fun and even tell your friends, that's so much fun every day going there. And have all the freedom. Basically, I have a fair amount of freedom for my work, and it's pretty flexible. If I get an idea, I can pretty much do it most of the time. And I like the interactions. You know, there's good connections with people, and there are always people you really connect with, maybe people that are further away from you, but they're there. And you can move around. You're not stuck in the same place all the time. And it's got okay money. How's that for you? Is anything missing? What's funny is I'll do this with people like coaches, for example, and they leave out getting paid. And forget that that's an important part of what, you know, their business is. So when you're the helper, like you're in my role, the NLPer, you might want to look and say, is anything missing? Is anything missing for you first, though?
I don't think so.
So what other things can you think of that might be on there that?
You have creativity.
Well, he had flexibility, being able to come up with creative ideas and do things. Anything else that you might think of? Yeah.
Stability.
Stability, security. Like you can count on that job being there. The company isn't going to go under, or you're not going to lose it all of a sudden. And these days, that's probably raised up more than it was 10 years ago, right? So should that be in there? Security, stability? And for some people, it may or may not be one. One time I was doing a training with a power company in Utah. And we did some, it wasn't this exercise, but we did some stuff with criteria. And one person stood up and he spoke for the group and he said, well, of course, security is going to be everybody's most important one. And about half the group looked at him and said, well, I didn't even have it on my list. And he got angry. He said, it's got to be on your list. That's the most important thing. Why else would you even have a job if you didn't? So it's an important one, especially now. I think especially if you've been in, some of you have been in places where your job's been disrupted as a result of all this. And so then it comes up higher on the list because you realize that's an important thing.
What about ethics?
Ethics. An ecological company.
Yeah. Security, I don't know, but ethics might be.
like ecology.
Yeah.
So would you want to go work for the nerve gas company?
How much do they pay?
Well, for some people that'll be an issue, and others it won't. Okay. So is that something would you need to add that?
Yeah, yeah.
But ethics. Now, I think ethics is going to be one of those ones that's a little bit tricky, though. But it's a great question because think about the banking business. A few years ago, ethics kind of went by the wayside, right? Where do you put that? So if you could move around, be mobile, but not have money or not have ethics, is that okay with you?
No, it's not.
Where would that be? So you might want to rethink that. I think ethics is one of those things that's a great one to add in, and it might not be one you typically think about, but you'd assume it. So if it was a company that violated your values in some way.
It might be even most important one of all of those.
So if I say, yeah, come work with us, fun, freedom, flexibility, options, good connections.
But we produce
torture small animals.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you?
No.
So where does it go? That's what I figured. Yes?
What about providing a service?
Yeah, making a difference in the world. So what if you had a job, it's an ethical company, it's fun, there's a lot of freedom, there's flexibility and creative options, and it's good interaction and connections, you're moving around, it pays good money, and you're actually delivering a product you don't think is very valuable. Remember pet rocks? Stuff like that.
That's a good one.
So is that one missing? Does that?
Yeah, I think so.
Does it need to be something for you that would be making a difference in people's lives?
Yeah, I think so.
So where would that go? You ever see the show Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts in it? Remember at one point she couldn't believe that this guy, he did takeovers of companies, and then they disband the companies and they take the profits out. She said, "You mean you don't make anything? What are you doing in that business?" It was basically just a business where you'd make money, but you didn't do any, you didn't add to the world at all. So making a difference, where does this go?
I think it's up here.
So if you could have fun but not make a difference, that's not okay with you?
No. Well, maybe, wow.
Depends on how much fun, right?
Sorry?
Okay, so anything else might be there?
Do you want to be self-employed or do you want to be employed?
Sorry, you?
Well, the question is, do you want to be self-employed or employed? But you could be in either one and have it meet all these conditions, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, they want to be self. Yeah. No matter what.
What would you guess from what he wrote?
Self.
This might be hard to fill in a company, right? Especially a big corporate company.
Yes, probably so.
But there are sometimes there are jobs in those corporate settings that are like this. I had a friend that worked for HP for a long time. In fact, I have several of them, and they actually went through all the NLP trainings, but they were internal consultants, and they ran their own shop, and they did their own thing, and they're kind of like agents were in that company at that time.
There are companies these days, they meet in coffee shops.
Yeah.
Their laptop and they just gather around.
Yeah, one of our students was an Apple computer sales guy, and he worked out of his house and basically did all of his own scheduling and all that stuff. So it is possible, but they still work. It was like being self-employed in a way. So how does that look to you? Anything else missing? Okay, now, yes, one more.
What about work environment?
That was move around.
I think that might be included in move around, but the work environment. Like, would you want to work in a dingy, filthy building that smelled?
No, I don't think so.
Now, there's sometimes you've got a baseline of stuff that beyond which it's just not acceptable, right? So if you walked into a filthy building that looked dangerous, that might just be an automatic it wouldn't meet your basic standards. Or it's like the restaurant, Howard said, you go into some of these places and they're dirty, right? You don't want to eat there.
I'm asking if competence is important or self-mastery because of the initial thing that you said about high standards.
Well, competencies, so learning might be another one that would go in here. Like, would this be something that, so there are things that are missing from here that I move around to kind of like travel, but some people would have travel is a really big deal. Some people would have learning is, some would have, there's a clear path for advancement. You know, those are all possibilities there. But they may be not so important if all the other criteria are met. So there's some other ideas.
Yeah.
But we don't want to spend too much time here. You know, we could name a lot of things that might not be on there that, if these things were all satisfied, wouldn't be such a big deal. Or he'd do them anyway. Like he might learn anyway or develop competency anyway. Is that kind of, that's a good question. Ready?
I think so.
Good to you?
I think so. Sounds good.
So let's go to the top one. What we're gonna do here is we want to install it now. So take a minute and think of ethics and what that means to you. Maybe open your body up a little bit, Leo, and just get a sense of what you think about an ethical organization that you'd really feel maybe proud to be a part of. It's got integrity, it's doing good in the world. And notice how that can be supported by this idea of making a difference. Take a step back. Get a sense of what that means to you, what you might do and be to make a difference. And step back and notice how that can be supported by this criteria of having fun. If you're having fun and making a difference in an ethical place, that's pretty cool. And notice how fun can be supported by freedom. So if you're really free to be who you are and do what you do and do it your way and schedule yourself and kind of make it yours. Notice how the ethics, making a difference, fun can be supported by this whole thing of freedom for you. Like it might not even be fun if you didn't have any freedom. It might not be really ethical if you didn't have any freedom. So get a sense of that. Notice how that freedom can be supported by this flexibility that you want. So you can be creative on the job. You can go with options. You can run with your own ideas. And how that's supported by good connections where you're playing off each other and you have good interactions with people that help things build and grow in a positive way. Notice how that can be supported by being able to move around. So you're not just in one location all the time, but you're getting to get out and move about and experience different things. Notice how all of these things can be supported by making a good living, by making good money. So one more time, we're going to go back up the other way. So get a sense of this. You're making good money, what you want to live on that's going to be good for you. That you get, notice how that will support moving around. How that will support having good interactions. Flexibility. And notice how that flexibility and good interactions and moving around to money will support your freedom. Notice how freedom, flexibility, good interactions, moving around to money support fun. And how that fun, freedom, and all those things can support making a difference in the world and the people around you. And how all of those things can really support being in an integrous, ethical environment that really represents who you are, that you can feel a part of. So as you begin to really consider what career options you've got, get a clear sense of this is what needs to be satisfied for you. And if you don't find all these things or make them happen, then you're going to be out of integrity with yourself. This is what's going to make your life feel good in that arena. So just take a minute, drop inside, and really honor this idea of ethics, making a difference, having fun, freedom, flexibility, good interactions, moving around, money. So So as you look over different possibilities, these are the checklists that you need to have in your mind. Get a sense of how you represent those things too. When you're ready, just come back here. And I suggest go write those down, but keep them in mind.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Good work.
Thank you. Thanks.
Before you take that off, questions? Any questions for Leo? What questions do you have for Leo?
So how are you feeling now as you consider your future?
Feels good. Feels good. Yeah. There are even some things like ethics and making a difference. Making a difference, I thought about that one. It was like more or less in my head, but ethics, I didn't know about that one. So that's very good addition to my ideas.
Does that make a difference if you were doing it in your own language?
Like these words in Dutch.
Because those were foreign.
It's hard to say, but I think so.
You could try it again in your own language when you do it.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning this idea of high standards, but so my question is, does this help you in understanding that sense, giving you that sense of how high standards fits into your job search?
Well, I think for me, I think that one isn't figured out yet. This is a good way to to get like the criteria, but I think like the high standards isn't figured out yet.
He still might have an imprint there,
Yeah.
and that's what I think we already discovered. But what I think it might do is help him identify what's more important to put his high standards into and what's less important. These are the things where your high standards need to go.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to go whether you're writing bright or smart on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. Because that's where it gets stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And also this is about satisfying you. So I think that what this gives him is kind of a bigger frame to start putting things in. And this is actually where if you were my client, I might have actually started here. Because with that, now we can say, so what could keep this from happening? Maybe he says, I'm too perfectionistic. I've got these high standards. So what's causing that? And that might be an imprint. So that's a good question. Okay?
Okay.
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
Having fun or having freedom. And the person will give you often a head answer, but not a heart answer. Does that make sense to everybody? And so that question is, if you could have number one, if you could have number two, but not number one, is that okay with you? If you get a no, then you know you're in the right place. Then just keep stepping back with it.
I was wondering if you could suggest a couple more issues to work with that specifically relate to health and where this would fit in.
With these criteria?
Yeah.
One could be eating. Your food choices would be a good one. One time I had a guy that was really overweight, and he was the seventh son in a family. They were all boys. And what do you think his issue was on eating? He was way overweight. When he was a kid, what do you think happened to him? He never got full. He never got enough. And so, you know what his overriding criteria was? How full will I get if I eat this? So if you're choosing the healthy salad or the double cheeseburger, what are you going to choose? But his criteria was always, what's going to fill me up? And it was probably a great criteria when he was starving to death as one of these kids in the family. It was a horrible criteria when he was 45 and had his own life. So eating choices, exercise program, lifestyle choices would be good ones. Relationship is a good one, relating to health. If you have a healthy relationship, it's statistically the most important, outside of genetics, I think it's the most important contributor to long life, as long as you're not violating your health by doing certain other things like smoking too much. Yes?
Family and business, how to share both the importance of the family and the business, how to share the time.
Yeah, what you want to do is you say, what you want to do is say, what's a context where I want to be a lot more clear about my criteria? If it's really clear, then you can go after it. It makes such a difference. You know, there are a number of people here that are just getting coach practices started. What do you want in a client? What do you want in a practice? And often you can start discovering a lot of things that could be helpful. What do you want in a career? That's one we did. All of these things I think speak to health because health's impact. We can't really separate our health from all these other things. That's why we call it health and well-being. Yes.
I have a success story from using this process.
Could you stand up?
Yes. In the practitioner training, or some training, I can't remember which one we did. I did this exercise over the weekend. Then on Monday, I woke up early, thinking about how I'm going to pay my rent at the end of the month, feeling completely freaked out. And I get this phone call from a woman saying, I realize this is a coaching client, by the way. She's the executive director of a large nonprofit agency. She says, I know this is last minute, but could you come and do that tapping thing that you do at our retreat? And I'm like, sure. And they're like, so how much do you charge? And I'm like, oh, $100 an hour, but I can make a discount for you. 80. And so I made like $1,000 that weekend, which completely covered my bills. But after that retreat, which I nailed perfectly, they came back to me and said, we want to give you a 6-month contract, have you do our entire staff like this. And I just completed a 6-month contract that fit my criteria for the kind of work that I wanted. Exactly.
Well, now you're getting into the magical part of it. Congratulations, yeah. Because
and that's rolling into, they're now applying for a big grant for me to train 20 young people in East Oakland how to do EFT.
Cool. Yeah. So sometimes when you get really clear about your criteria, that's what you're going to be putting out in the world, and you'll start making those connections. And it really does happen. So Chris and I really get really clear. Good to be back here. Yay! It's good to be back. I always know that you're in good hands with Robert Dilts. Isn't he a brilliant guy? Those of you that hadn't met him before, he's amazing person. He and my understanding is that he got to do a demonstration last night, but you didn't get to actually do the meta mirror. Is that yes? And it's a good process to do, I think, because it teaches you things on multiple levels. And I think in some ways you can relate it to the forgiveness process that you learned earlier, giving forgiveness, where you kind of have that mirror kind of thing. But I think this brings it in at a different level. So I think a great place to start this morning would be to go ahead and do the meta mirror process. And so I want to remap the territory for the next 3 days. So and give you a couple of options. When we put up our ambitious agenda, Mike called us on it. Said he was making a book we wouldn't get through it, and he's right, as usual. But so there are a couple of pieces on there that I think are more important and some less important. A couple I think are really quite useful. How many of you read Beliefs, Pathways to Health and Well-Being? If you have, you know there's a whole chapter on criteria. And criteria is something that often you deal with all kinds of life issues, like health issues, personal issues. Sometimes I get people who they want a new career, or they want to start their own business, or they want to begin a relationship. And I'll often ask them, well, so what do you want what's your criteria for that? And they hadn't really thought about it. And sometimes if you really think that through and leverage it, it makes a big difference. How many of you have changed a non-healthy habit in your life by finding another criteria that was more important to you? Like maybe you quit smoking because you wanted to live longer, or something like that, you know. So remember years ago we had there's a woman in a training who was a new grandmother, and she was trying to quit smoking, but she did all these things and wasn't. And what got her to quit was wanting to spend time with her grandchildren when they got teenagers. And she was afraid that her odds would not be as good if she continued some of her unhealthy habits. So the criteria of relationship outweighed the criteria of whatever benefits she got from smoking. So sometimes criteria is a really key thing to do. Some of the biggest changes I've seen in working with NLP have come through criteria changes as well. Sometimes we're in conflict because our criteria isn't organized properly. We're weighing this one against that one. Do I want this or that? And you get in these dilemmas. And so, I know trilemmas, but also you get into dilemma. And if you reorganize your criteria and get clear on what's important to you, that can make a big difference. Another thing that I found incredibly useful with working with health issues is helping people really apply a different order of beliefs to what they're experiencing. And some of the best beliefs I've seen for health and well-being are right on these yellow banners here, the NLP presuppositions. Can you imagine what the world would be like if everybody had a firm understanding that behind every behavior is a positive intention? Do you think that'd change the world in some dramatic way? And the more you do NLP, the more convincing it is that it's true. You know, in NLP we don't do things like exorcisms because there are no bad parts of yourself. And I've been to things where they said that's a bad part, you have to stomp it out. There's for example, in some of the coach literatures, they talk about gremlins that we have. And gremlins are the things we want to stomp out and get rid of. And you don't want to ever stomp out and get rid of a part. What you want to do is find its positive intent and reintegrate it. So this idea of things like gremlins is probably going to create more problems than it solves. So you can take, by using anchoring and the idea of disassociation and getting a double description on things, along with these NLP presuppositions, you can often make incredible changes. So we're going to be applying NLP presuppositions to a context or to even physical issues. Remember the first time we did this in a group, we had a woman who had chronic fatigue. And she actually was in a lot of pain and was doing all this stuff to deal with that was complicated. She was doing color therapy, and she had to sit by a window, she had natural light. She was taking all this medicine. And we did